Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. I appreciate you being here. Welcome all. And today we're going to continue on with, I think it's chapter 14 of Ledge of Creation, Toward a Ledge. And since it's 10 o'clock, let's begin. My coffee here. Oh, shoot. All right, this chapter is called The High Seas. Mother Nature was standing rigidly on the edge of her personal cloud, watching the race with such passion that Frankel thought she was going to injure herself. In fact, he knew without any shadow of a doubt, that she would soon be complaining about some strange ache she couldn't quite put her finger on. And more to the point, Frankel knew he would have to bear the brunt of her discomfort for months to come. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the image of the forthcoming storm of discomfort. Overreaction, and "You just don't understand," that would soon issue from the queen of the ledge. Muttering under his breath, he carried on rearranging some furniture that Mother Nature had requested he should do immediately. She watched the riders snaking through the narrow, twisting lanes of the port town, the wooden houses standing proudly together until someone emptied a toilet bucket onto the road. Mother Nature scowled. Yes, she had wanted to preserve this era, but there were some aspects that really shouldn't have been kept. Some towns on the shores of the sea had been allowed to progress, but she'd always had a soft spot for Ketchum High. It was both romantic and crude all at the same time. Rattling past the human waste, Ronald Nutter was already celebrating his win. But before he had even finished. In his excitement, he turned to the crowd and waved, which meant he didn't see the approaching tight right-hand bend. Only realizing his error when his face came within inches of the spectator's face, he plowed into the curb with no time to brake, bouncing straight over his handlebars and disappearing into the watching mass of spectators. Ronald Nutter landed with a sickening thud as the crowd parted. Anna, the quickest to respond to the latest development, seized the initiative. Reg howled and stayed with her. They were neck and neck on the final narrow cobbled street as the finish line by the harbor came into view. The crowds roared them on, and the atmosphere was electric. Both Anna and Reg could smell victory. A howl of pain then filled the air, and it wasn't Reg. Reg knew it wasn't him because he too now found himself tumbling through the air down the hill towards the finish line. The last thing he remembered seeing was his front wheel embedded in a very angry-looking dog. Well, they say peace is in the eye of the beholder, and in Reg's case, pieces were in his eye as parts of his bike flew past his face as he tumbled towards the finish. The salty line at the bottom of the hill next to the harbor was surrounded by a motley crew of sailors, wenches, and a whole host of 18th century paraphernalia. The howling misfit bounced towards them along the cobbles. This isn't going to end well, he thought. The unforgiving cobbles making him howl as he rolled down the hill, crossed the finish line, and plowed into a parked cart. The thud was sickening. A wooden registration plate fell from the cart, hitting him squarely on the head. The crowd gasped as Reg lay on the floor for what seemed like an eternity. Voices echoed around in his foggy mind as he tried to shake off the veil of darkness. It was another 20 minutes before Reg felt the need to open his eyes and look around. Anna was by his side, smiling. You all right? Reg groaned and attempted to move his head, legs, and arms. I think so. Anna looked down, concerned. She sat Reg up against the cart and fetched him a drink of water. Several minutes of confusion followed when Reg discovered he couldn't remember what day it was, what he was doing, and why he was on the floor. Anna sensed his predicament. I think you have a concussion, she said calmly, examining Reg's cracked helmet. Really? What day is it? The port town of Ketchum High was nestled in an open, sloping plain that stretched into the distance towards the Truffle Cake Mountains, which loomed over the surrounding countryside with a certain curiosity and an imaginary pull. They were enchanting to look at from the safety of the town. Down by the harbor, a vast array of activity from all the walks of life was on display. Men rolled wooden barrels along the small promenade as horses hauled carts up and down the stocks, leaving their waste wherever they pleased. The odd stagecoach rattled by, its occupants yelling at the local riffraff to get out of the way. All the while, the salty smell of the sea hung over the harbor, as did the seagulls waiting to snatch at any easy lunch. Ketchum High was one of the many pockets on the ledge that time had passed by, courtesy of Mother Nature. Of course, who was a bit of a romantic when it came to history. She liked museums, too. Later, once the rest of the peloton had arrived, the team captains, including Wilson, who was now standing in for Clayton, got together to discuss the arrangements for the team's passage across the Sea of Biscuits, which was to be undertaken using the 3 galleons that were docked in the harbor. The still very confused Reg was taken to a bunk on board the galleon LS Potatoe Pie and ordered to rest, along with 2 other galleons, the LS Tangerine and the LS Splinter. The LS Potato Pie was to sail to Mother's Landing, a 655-mile trip across the deep blue sea. The sun had all but set, and candlelight on the ships flickered faintly as the ships bobbed in the slight breeze. The galleons were lined up in a neat row, moored against their own jetties, and at the dock end, one of the long jetties sat the Barnacle, a salty wooden shack that served food that you wouldn't give to a dog, and grog that made you blind. It was brimming with sailors and pirates, and now the peloton. And after the 11th fist fight ended to a round of raucous cheers, the teams resumed their conversations. Right there, let me get a drink. So, who actually won then? Said Stan, who was hanging from a beam inside the wooden building doing pull-ups. Well, Anna says it was a draw as Reg and his bike barrel rolled over the line parallel with her front wheels, said Derek. Well, we'll settle for a draw then, said Austin, raising a glass. Derek turned to Barry. I heard you found your descending wheels. Barry nodded and then frowned. Those little buggers pinched my rear brake, Closks. There was a moment of silence, but Derek couldn't resist. Lucky break, then. Everyone else chuckled along with him. It wasn't the joke that was funny. It was his laughter that was infectious. Their laughter was abruptly interrupted as a further commotion erupted from the far side of the bar. The teams ducked as a chair flew over their heads. Apparently, this latest scuffle was about mistaken identity. Hell, this place is mental, Colin said as he watched the evening's entertainment smash 7 bells out of each other. Austin nodded. Certainly is. Zodiac told me that Mother Nature is an historian. That's why this place exists. Historian or cage fighting enthusiast? What's the difference? Said Colin, turning toward the ladies' team. You okay, girls? Not really, said Lippy. The girls were sitting in a corner on the long settee that curved around a table on which the words Patch Wazir were crudely scratched. Underneath it read Sew a Scar alongside other barely legible scribbles describing sexual conquest and the size of the barmaid's assets. What's the matter? Lippy looked a little apprehensive. Those 2 sailors over in the opposite corner. She gave a sly nod towards 2 unsavory characters. One of them has a hook and the other is wearing 2 eye patches. Can you see them? Colin turned towards the sailors and turned back to Lippy. I'm not sure they're sailors. They look more like pirates. Well, whatever they are, they won't stop staring at us. Colin turned back and gave the sailors another evaluation. See, said Lippy. Look at the way they're watching us. Colin scratched his head, but the one on the right has a double eye patch. I don't think he can see anything. Well, I know, but he's staring right at us. Colin looked at the unfortunate blind sailor and then had another look at his accomplice with a hook. And I think his friend is 2 sheets to the wind. I don't care. And why do you think they're pirates? Well, said Colin, one of them has a hook where his hand should be, but he also has a parrot on the shoulder and a big bushy black beard. So what? Well, I don't like to be stereotypical, but he does resemble a pirate. Libby was not impressed. Well, whatever they are, sailors, pirates, I don't like the look of them. Colin shrugged and noticed Team All Gear got up to leave. heading for their ship, the LS Flitter. Ah, girls, boss, he muttered under his breath. Returning from the bar, Derek placed a dirty glass filled with a bubbling liquid under Colin's nose. "The hell was that?" said Colin. It's it's teeming with life. The bar lady said it was a special brew, but you have to drink it quickly to appreciate it. Colin looked at the foul liquid. "I think you need to drink it quickly before it dissolves the glass." Derek laughed and took a sip of the rancid brew. "Lovely," he lied. "You appeared in deep conversation with Lippy. All okay?" Colin sniffed at the brew and almost retched. "Yeah, she was just concerned about those two in the corner watching them." Derek followed Colin's nod and located the duo. His head suddenly exploded with a joke. "Why did the pirate refuse to say, 'Aye, aye, Captain'?" Colin groaned and took a sip of his drink. "Because he had only one eye." Colin looked at Derek and shook his head. "That pirate over there has no eyes." Derek looked thoughtful for a moment. "Why the pirate refused to say, 'Aye, Captain'?" "Oh, I can only guess." Derek burst out laughing. The magic rod was clearly activating his humor box. "Why couldn't the pirate stop thinking about sailing?" Colin put his head in his hands. "'Cause he had ships for reins." Colin had no idea if it was the grog or the surreal atmosphere, but he was now laughing hard. That one was actually funny. Around an hour later, and after a couple more pointless fights over spilt grog and someone looking at someone else's pint the wrong way, Team Cogs and Closks escorted the ladies' team out of the shack and made their way towards their assigned ships, the LS Potato Pie and the LS Tangerine. It was going to be a long voyage from Ketchum High to Mother's Landing across the Sea of Biscuits. Teams, some of them worse for wear, walked staggered or fell into their respective bunks. A couple of hours later, hidden behind a collection of wooden barrels, old anchors, and an assortment of sailing paraphernalia, and having sidestepped countless piles of horse manure, Buck Squad and Morris Hammer were holding another of their secret meetings. The bulky figure of Morris dwarfed the Administrator General as he laid out his detailed plan. When the oversized henchman had finished his presentation, Buck Squad scratched his chin. "So let me get this straight. You have kidnapped the crew of the LS Potato Pie and the U.S. Tangerine and replaced them with imposters who will steer Team Cogs and Clocks and Team Lipsticks and Shoes away from Mother's Landing and deposit them in the yellow stained port, 100 miles from where they should be." Morris smiled, his cracked teeth displaying years of neglect. "Yep." Buck stared at Morris for a while. "You know," he said finally, "this might actually work." Morris smiled again. "It will work. I insisted that it had to." Bucks gave Morris another long, hard stare as he imagined the threats that had been placed on the impostors. "Morris?" "Yes." "Please don't smile." And then Bucks cursed as a seagull dropped his payload on his shoulder. The Sea of Biscuits, the largest sea at present on the ledge, was an expanse of salty blue water that shimmered with mystery. It came into existence when, one day while surveying the ledge, Mother Nature decided she had always wanted a water feature. At its maximum length, it stretched well over 1,000 miles, and its width was just short of 550 miles. There were many ports, towns, and villages along the measurable shore that encircled the sea. They prided themselves on their own particular identities, and most of them had not been trapped in a time freeze. These ports and towns were civilized and modern in comparison with a trip to Ketchum High, for their inhabitants was on a par with a trip to Derek's telejoke evening in his dusty cellar. The following morning was near perfect. The sun's rays blazed down on the moored galleon, seeping through the small portholes and into the sleeping quarters, stabbing at the heavy eyelids of the hungover. Over the years, the galleons had been modified, and the lower decks had been fitted out with cabins and a tight corridor that squeezed through the deck. As the teams dragged themselves out of their pits and onto the decks of their respective ships, wobbling under the effects of the special brew, Ketchum High's port was awash with activity. Deckhands scurried up and down gangplanks as They loaded supplies and tended to last-minute chores. The LS Splinter, the LS Tangerine, and the LS Potato Pie bobbed proudly in a line at their respective piers, their wooden hulls free of any barnacles, rising gently up and down in the salty water. It was a scene from a time gone by, but it was one of Mother Nature's favorite areas, and she had decided long ago to freeze the clock. She thought sail ships were romantic as well as, well, very clean. There was no fear of them dispensing oil into the sea, which for Frangle was a blessing, as it would be he who would have to clean it up. Sitting up on deck, Red had finally come round enough to wonder what the hell was going on. His memory still in tatters, with a white bandage tied around his head and held in place with a pin, he swayed unsteadily on the poop deck at the stern of the LS Potato Pie, staring down into the busy port. Feeling a burning urge to ask a question, he turned to Derek. "Adam," he said in a serious voice, "what's going on?" Derek, who was nursing a hangover from the pits of the Dark One, she blamed on a dodgy pint, looked around. As they were the only two people standing on deck, he turned and gave Reg an odd look. "Who, Adam?" Reg looked at Derek with a pinch of disdain. "Well, you, of course. Who else is called Adam around here?" Derek looked perplexed. Clearly, the bang to Reg's head had been a little harder than he had thought. "You'd better go and lie back down, Reg. You took a nasty knock." "Oh, who's Reg?" "Oh, what? You are." "Well, not. My name's Steve." "Your name is Reg. Do you feel the urge to howl?" "No. Should I?" Derek, looking a little like a worried mother, called over to Barry, who had appeared on deck with the rest between Cogs and Closks, none of whom looked very seaworthy. "I think Reg needs a little longer in bed," he whispered to the lanky hill climber. "I told you my name was Steve," said Reg, butting in. "Jonathan, would you please tell Adam what my name is?" Barry shrugged and looked at Derek and then at Reg. "Who's Jonathan?" "You are," Reg snapped, "and over there is Paul, Mark, Alan, and Craig." Barry sighed and his expression softened. "Look, Reg, you've had a little accident." But before he could finish the sentence, Reg bellowed, "Steve! My name is Steve!" Tugging heavily, he adjusted his bandage, looked around, and spotted the crew's crow's nest high above his head. "I think I might climb up there later," he muttered to himself and headed towards the bowsprit. "I think we had better keep an eye on Reg," said Derek, and as he watched Reg climb up to the forecastle and disappear out of view, the bell chimed from somewhere on the dock, indicating that the ships were ready to depart. Barry nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I think you're right," and then grimaced with a fart. Sitting on the poop deck at the stern of the LS Tangerine and all wearing onesies, the girls waved at the crowds watching on from the docks. On the LS Sprinter, Team All the Gear also waved enthusiastically, but in sync with each other. They're still minus Clayton and appeared to be very happy about it. The cheering grew louder as the ships hauled up their anchors and slowly drifted out into the harbor with the tide. Side by side, the three tall ships silently slipped through the entrance of the harbor and out into the open sea. It's all inside a small pilot hut just under the poop deck. The helmsman nodded at Bucks as he caught the eye of the Administrator General. Feeling upbeat that Morse's plan was now in motion, Bucks Wad decided to sit back, relax, and enjoy one of his few passions. Having always been fascinated by the open sea, he had developed a love of sailing. Like a bad smell, he lingered on the quarterdeck, enjoying the salty breeze and nodding slyly towards the captain of the LS Tangerine and LS Potato Pie, who responded discreetly by touching the brims of their large hats. Buck smiled to himself. Everything was coming together nicely. A shout rang out from above. "Hoist the mainsails!" Bucks was in his element. He truly wished he could have spent more time sailing the seas of the ledge. Up on the mainmast, sailors dropped two large sheets of white cloth that instantly caught the wind, propelling the ship forward into the vast open water. The LS Potato Pie was now plowing through the sea at top speed, its sprit sail, and foresails billowing in the strong wind. From his position on the forecastle deck, Reg watched the sailors with fascination as they clambered up and down the rat lines. He was dangling his arms over the side of the ship, mesmerized by the waves, when a figure disturbed his blissful moment. "Hi, Reg, thought I'd check up on you," Zodiac said. "Why is everyone calling me Reg? My name is Steve." "Steve?" Reg sighed. "Not you as well." Zodiac stared at Reg, more confusion than normal. "Hey, it's rude to stare." "No, I'm sorry. Just that you are the strangest person I've ever met." Red looked a little offended. "Strange? Why?" "Well, the howling for a start." "Well, I don't howl." "Well, you used to." Red looked over the side of the ship at the gentle waves lapping the wooden hull. The sea was calm and the wind had dropped. He found the whole experience relaxing. Why are we on wooden sailing boats, anyways? Surely there are motorized varieties nowadays. So I stared at Reg in disbelief. Not only was Reg not howling, but he was also having a normal conversation. He slowly gathered his thoughts. Oh, Mother Nature likes wooden sailing boats. They don't pollute the sea. Reg nodded. A sensible approach. A moment's silence as Reg watched the sun setting in the western edge of the ledge. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zodiac agreed. "Does it make you want to howl?" Reg turned sharply towards Zodiac. "Why on earth would I want to howl?" As the LS Potato Pie, LS Tangerine, and LS Splinter slipped into the night, Zodiac patted Reg on his shoulder. "I hear there are virgin brides in Mother's Landing. I assume they'll make a man proud one day," Reg replied in a serious tone. Zodiac shrugged. "Okay, Reg, you win. I'm off to bed." "See, for the umpteenth time, what exactly have I won?" Zodiac looked sympathetically at Reg and headed for his bunk, greeting Derek, who was on his way to join Reg on deck. "Hello, Adam. Beautiful evening. Wouldn't you agree?" "Huh? Yeah, it is. Indeed." A moment's silence drifted past Reg. "Steve! My bloody name is Steve!" Derek continued. "Steve, you know this is a 6-day journey." "Yeah, I do." "Well, me and the lads have been talking, and we really are worried about you. You're not yourself, but we really want to help you." Red straightened the badge on his head for a second time. "Well, you need not worry. I feel fine, even though I can't really remember where we are and what we are doing." Derek stared into the creeping darkness. "Come, my friend," said Derek, taking Reg by the hand and leading him inside the ship. "You need sleep." "I got another drink. My voice is going." "Oh, yep, there it goes." The next morning on the LS Potato Pie, a duck quacked and a cannon fired. Below deck, the cyclists were starting to stir in their various accommodations. On the starboard side of the ship, bunk beds had been squeezed into the tiny cabins, while on the port side, the rooms were more luxurious, with double beds and en-suite toilet holes in the floor that led to a retention tank. No pollution as ordered by Mother Nature. Packed into their tiny cabin, which comprised triple bunks on either side of the room and a hammock strung across the ceiling, Team and Cogs and Clocks bounced out of their beds, frightened to near death. Austin, having drawn the short straw and ending up in the hammock, suffered the biggest fall. When the cannon fired, Austin shook with shock and rolled out of his hammock, falling, luckily for him, into the strong arms of Bernard, who gently put him down. "Thanks, Bernard. That could have been painful." "Yeah, no problem." Barry opened the narrow door and peered down the even narrower corridor. "It's all clear," he whispered. "Why you whispered?" Derek asked in a whisper. "I don't know," Barry whispered back. "What'd you expect to find?" said Derek, wondering what Barry was looking for. "Don't know." Colin yawned and scratched his back with a solid baguette. "What was that loud bang?" Barry shrugged. "I have no idea, Colin, but I'm bloody hungry. Did anyone hear a duck quack?" said Sam. "What?" Before anyone could answer, a door adjacent to their own across the narrow passageway opened, and Zodiac peered out. Even he appeared to be a little confused at the commotion. Dressing as quickly as their cramped conditions would allow, the team light-footed their way up onto the quarterdeck. walked along towards the prow and dropped down into the galley that housed the food bar. A large, featureless wooden room dominated by a brick oven. Stretching from one side of the ship to the other was a very impressive buffet bar of food, as well as plenty of seats and tables. Barry was delighted. Brilliant sunlight poured into the room from a small portals set into the walls. Another large explosion filled the air as the cannon was fired a second time. "Why are they firing the cannon?" said Austin, still whispering. That be the wake-up call, you landlubber," said a gruff voice from behind the buffet bar, where a short, stocky man was turning over pieces of bacon on a little stone grill. His long beard bristled as he spoke, and his arms were covered in tattoos, mainly acres, ships, and whales. He moved from the bacon and began turning the sausages. The ship's cook looked more like a ship's executioner, and to Colin's complete disgust, he wasn't even wearing a white hat. Perched on top of his bald head was a thin, dirty piece of cloth that was more like a headband. And no sailor would be complete without a thick gold earring hanging from his left ear. "Oh, and you don't need to whisper," said the cook continued. "Oh, why a cannon?" said Austin. "Why not?" Austin shrugged, grabbed a piece of bacon and some toast, and joined his teammates at a table. A few minutes later, the ship's crew began piling into the room. They had a look of unpleasantness about them. "You look a little rough," said Barry through a mouthful of bagel. Derek nodded, trying hard not to make eye contact with any of them. A couple of sailors on the table next to them bore scars and tattoos of long-gone lovers, and one of them sported an eye patch. Their appearance really didn't give Team Cogs and Closks any reason to want to engage in polite conversation with them. One grunted while the other cleaned under his fingernails with a sharp knife. "I think we had better eat up and clear out," said Derek. "Patch and Scar over there are making me nervous. They're more like pirates than sailors," said Bernard. And then a wide smile enveloped Derek's face. "How does a pirate get his mast up?" There was a collective groan. "He uses his wench." And there it was, that infectious laugh. The team nodded, suppressing their laughter as his rubbish joke, and stood up to leave. Barry collected as much food as he could and waddled out of the door with his pockets brimming. As they made their way back towards the quarterdeck, Bernard stopped and looked around. "Hang on, where's Reg?" The rest of the team came to a halt. Derek was the first to speak. "He must be still inside." "Stan, can you come with me and have a look?" Stan was already halfway up a rat line. "Woohoo! Will do!" And he swung down on the deck, scuttled off back towards the galley, and peered around the door. Derek followed. "What do you see?" said Derek, speaking in a whisper again. "I see Reg. You're sitting with Patch and Scar." "Oh, no." In the absence of any common sense, Reg had decided to try and get along with the unsavory-looking crew. The two of the worst were now entertaining Mr. Wolf. "So, you're both reformed pirates, then," said Reg. "Aye, that be right. Patch and me have been sailing the seas for years, plundering and whatnot." "Well, that sounds rather interesting and exciting." Scar's mouth turned up into a gummy smile, his teeth having long since departed. "Aye, that be right. Aye, we're fun," said Patch. "So now you're working for the captain of this ship?" "Aye, aye." "And you and your friends, you're riding the Tory Ledge?" said Scar. Red looked up at the wooden ceiling, his face crumpled in a frown. "I have no idea. Apparently I crashed and banged my head." Red looked lost for a moment. "I can't remember anything." "Really?" said Patch. "Once I lost my memory when I was clubbed on my head by a very bad pirate." Red leaned closer. "Really?" "Yeah, or me." Those pirate boys are hard to do. Oh man, my coffee's cold. Patch, Pat, I'll get this, yes. Patch pointed up to the part of his head Scar had clubbed, and they laughed even louder. Reg looked at the wooden table for a comfort. "How'd you recover?" "He ain't." Scar blurted out. Patch then responded with the quickest punch Reg ever seen. knocking Scar off his seat and until next week. That'll shut him up for a while, said Patch, staring at his colleague out cold on the floor. Very unfazed about what had just happened, Reg took another sip of his coffee. Patch continued, "It's a funny story, really. I had no memory for weeks. My attitude changed, and then one day we all attacked another ship. I was hit over the head for a second time, and then it all came flooding back. Really? All right, then." Hanging behind the door frame, Stan turned to Derek and whispered, "Did you hear that?" Derek nodded, and the cogs in his head began to turn. A couple of hours later, Reg made his way up to the quarterdeck where a small bar area had been constructed. He found his teammates sipping cool drinks and having a general chat about everything and nothing. As the cool breeze blew across his face, he instantly felt refresher, and the sounds of the sails ruffling in the wind helped him to relax. It was a strange sensation sailing without a motor. He glanced from side to side, only water could be seen, leading him to conclude that the sea was pretty big. Up above, the mainmast of the ship stood proud and erect, the sails catching the wind and propelling the galleon towards its destination. Higher still in the crow's nest, Stan was performing headstands and shouting, "Woohoo!" Reg shrugged and pulled up a chair next to Austin. "Hi, Reg." For the last time, Craig, my name is Steve." Austin blinked and felt a sharp nudge from Derek. "Oh, we're sorry, Steve." And he turned to Derek with mouth, "Craig?" Derek nodded and gestured him, "Just go along with it." "So we get to meet the captain today," Barry said, taking a long sip of his long pineapple and grapefruit shake. "We do indeed," Pound replied, examining the menu and cursing under his breath. Food that was on offer in the small bar was, in his words, appalling. "I wouldn't feed any of this to a dog," he muttered. He was also unimpressed with the cleanliness of the glasses, and the waiter was not at all what he had expected. A rough-bathed, salty, toothless sailor who sported a greasy ponytail that hung with disappointment from the back of his head. Even though he was bald on top, he really wasn't the best-looking guy on the ledge, and he lacked any form of manners. The alarm bells had already started chiming loudly in Colin's head. "When do we meet him?" asked Reg as he ordered a drink from the toothless, scruffy fat man, holding a note and pencil. The pencil broke as the chubby waiter pressed down too hard. "That'd be right about now, my boy," said a crackling voice from behind. Reg turned and stared into the black, penetrating eyes of Captain Short Jack Tinfoil. The left eye was covered with a patch. On his head sat a black hat that was so big it resembled a Mexican sombrero. His clothes were that of a poor pirate. Sagging red jacket and rolled up black trousers that covered up obligatory wooden leg of any ship's captain worth their salt. The other strange feature was the bird sitting on his shoulder. For reasons only known to Captain Short Jack Tinfoil, he had decided that a parrot was not his style and plumped for a duck instead. Dario the duck, a green-headed, brown-bodied duck with a suspicious look in his eyes, quacked loudly. Clearly, Captain Short Jack Tinfoil was a bit of a shipwreck. Pulling up a chair, he ordered himself a strong rum. "Welcome to the potato pie. I am Captain Short Jack Tinfoil." "Thank you," Derek replied. "This is my team, Cogs and Closks." And he proceeded to list the names of his teammates until he reached Reg. "And this is Steve." Well, Captain Tinfoil narrowed his one eye and looked confused. "Well, which is it, Reg or Steve?" "Reg had an accident. He thinks he's called Steve now." "Yeah, that's a shame," Captain Tinfoil said. "Dual identity ain't not good for the stomach." Reg cut in. "I do not even remember being called Reg. My name is Steve." He then turned to the captain. "And, sir, I have one identity, and thus my stomach will be fine." Dario quacked as the captain shrugged. "By the way, interesting choice of birds," said Reg, staring at the duck perched on the captain's shoulder. "Ah, Dario being a true companion." "Why a duck?" "Why not?" "Well, most seafaring captains normally have a parrot." "They do, but they be pirates." "So you have a duck to prove you're not a pirate." "Aye." A strong rum appeared in a short, dirty glass. "Oh, me life liquid." The road vanished just as quickly as it had arrived, and Captain Tinfoil slammed the empty glass down on the table. "Arr, me hearty!" Derek seized the opportunity to interrupt Red's near normal conversation. "Does he get up at the quack of dawn?" Captain Tinfoil had sailed all the seas of the ledge and seen and heard a lot of strange things, but nothing had ever prepared him for witty one-liners. His face screwed up in confusion as he peered at Derek with his one eye working. Who?" Derek squirmed in the seat. "You're Duck Dario." Captain Tinfoil frowned. "Dario gets up when I get up." "So it's not at the quack of dawn, then." And he laughed, hoping for a response. Captain Short Tinfoil held his gaze for a further 10 seconds and leaned forward. "Quack of dawn, don't you mean the crack of dawn? Can he not talk properly?" "It was a joke. It wasn't funny." "Oh." Dario quacked, cutting the tense atmosphere. And the captain sat back in his seat. Sitting outside at a small table at the side of the ship, Zodiac had been watching the captain. Sensing something wasn't quite right, he decided to join in the conversation. "I don't know about you. I don't know you," said Zodiac, moving towards the rest of the team. "Indeed, the ledge is a big place," said Captain Tinfoil. Zodiac nodded as Tinfoil continued. "I do hope you'll enjoy the trip with us. We do aim to provide you with the best service possible and hope you will not be disappointed." "Thank you, Captain," Reg said, and served his coffee. Captain Tinfoil stood up, wobbled as he steadied himself on his wooden stump of a leg, and limped away. Daryl the duck turned his head, gave the team an evil look, and quacked. Once they were out of sight, Derek smiled. Even though his last joke would crash like a .com firm, he always had another one on the conveyor belt. What did the pirate say when his wooden leg got stuck in the freezer? "Shiver me timbers!" Later, in the privacy of their rooms, Team Cogs and Closks held an emergency meeting requested by Zodiac. Derek was still chuckling at his crap joke, and there were hundreds more in his head, but that was not the time. "I'm telling you, something is wrong," said Zodiac. "And what makes you so sure?" Colin mumbled with a chicken leg in his mouth. "As the first ever administrator, you tend to pick up on these things. And I am convinced Captain Tinfoil is not who he says he is." "And you know this just by meeting him once," said Austin. Zodiac nodded. "Captain Tinfoil was an imposter. Surely some of you here have a bad feeling." Colin wiped his mouth. "Well, now you mention it, the service is terrible. The hygiene is unacceptable and the food is shocking. So, yeah, I have my suspicions." Derek listened as the conversation between his teammates opened up into a debate. He was incredibly proud that they could actually do this. Then, as fast as an investment banker on his way to see a pensioner who had just had a windfall, Austin leapt up and knocked into Stan's feet, which were dangling from the ceiling as he performed pull-ups from the beams that supported the upper deck. "Hey, we're going the wrong way," he announced with dramatic effect. There was a collective sharp intake of breath, and the team scuttled back up to the quarterdeck, where Austin confirmed they were traveling northwest instead of northeast to Mother's Landing. "So where are we going?" asked Bernard. Austin turned to his brawny friend. "If we carry on in this direction, we'll be 100 or so miles from Mother's Landing on the wrong side." "So what you're saying is that when this ship docks, we'll have another 100 miles of cycling?" Austin nodded and then pushed his glasses back up his nose. "We need a plan," Derek said, "and quick." A duck quacked. "A plan is not what you need now, me hearty. It'd be a locked door." Captain Tinfoil and a number of scruffy-looking sailors emerged from the shadows. "But we are going in the wrong direction," Derek protested. "That be right. But I am somewhat puzzled, though, as to how you worked it out so quickly. Me and me hearty crew were hoping to string this out and just collect our booty at the end. No trouble, see, just a smooth crossing." "Who's paying you?" said Zodiac, knowing full well who was behind it. That would be telling. You couldn't just enjoy the cruise, could you?" "Grab 'em, lads." In response to Captain Tinfoil's orders, Scar and Patch and another number of their undesirables surrounded the teammates and secured their hands behind their backs. It took 3 of them to restrain Bernard. "Well, you're nothing but pirates," Colin shouted. Captain Tinfoil looked offended, and Dario quacked angrily, eyeballing the team. That be right, but I prefer the term reformed sailors. Lock 'em up, lads. All right, that's it. There's 3 other chapters that we're going to have to get through before we get all the pirates done. So we'll start that on Friday. Will be the next one. Now, over here, I have 2 books: Sheriff of the Small Town, Sheriff of the Small Town, and New Threat, books 1 and 2. And I have just finished editing book 3. So what does that mean? That means that after we finish with Legend Creation, I will begin reading Sheriff of the Small Town 3, and I don't have a subtitle for it yet. If I'm not mistaken, that's going to be the last of that series, unless I get enough responses to say people want more. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoyed hearing these stories. Legend Creation by Steve Wolf is available on Amazon, and it is one of my favorite books that I have, and I have a few. So I think it's funnier even than anything I've written. So that'll tells you something. So that's it for today. Be good to yourself, and I look forward to see you again on Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So have a good day. Bye. And now I gotta get this thing stopped.